The office was quiet that evening. Most people had already gone home, and the sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the empty space. Erin sat at her desk, finishing the last few lines of her report. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes heavy from staring at the screen all day. She sighed, shut down her computer, and gathered her things. When she stepped outside, the air hit her like a cold wave. The rain was falling harder than she had expected. It wasn't a gentle drizzle. It was the kind of rain that soaked through clothes in minutes. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, making the road look like it was covered in glass. She tightened her coat around her, wishing she had remembered her umbrella. The bus stop was a 10-minute walk away, and the next bus wouldn't come for at least half an hour. The thought of standing there, shivering in the cold, made her groan quietly to herself. She was about to start walking when a voice called out behind her. "Erin?" She turned quickly, a little startled. A car had pulled up near the curb, and in the driver's seat was someone she recognized. Daniel. Daniel was her boss's son. She had seen him a few times at the office, usually when he came to drop something off for his father or attend a meeting. They had never spoken much beyond polite greetings. He was younger than Herman, mid-20s, with an easy smile and the kind of confidence that seemed to come naturally to him. Even now, with the rain blurring the windows, she could see the warmth in his expression. "Need a ride?" Daniel asked, leaning slightly toward the passenger side. Erin hesitated. She wasn't used to accepting rides from people she barely knew, especially from someone connected to her work. It felt complicated. Her mind started listing all the reasons she should say no. It might be awkward. It might lead to questions. It might give him the wrong idea. But then another gust of wind cut through her coat and she shivered. She glanced toward the empty street, then back at Daniel. His car looked warm, safe. "Sure," she said finally, her voice almost lost under the sound of the rain. Daniel smiled and reached over to unlock the door. Erin opened it and slid into the passenger seat. The warmth of the heater hit her immediately, wrapping around her like a blanket. She exhaled, realizing just how cold she had been. The inside of his car smelled faintly of cedar and something fresh, like rain on pine trees. She brushed a few drops of water from her hair and set her bag at her feet. Daniel pulled away from the curb, his hands steady on the steering wheel. "A long day?" he asked, glancing at her briefly before focusing on the road again. "You could say that," she replied with a small smile. For a while, they drove in silence. The rain pattered against the roof, and the windshield wipers moved back and forth in a steady rhythm. The glow from the dashboard lights made the inside of the car feel almost unreal, like they were in a small, quiet world of their own. Erin wasn't sure why, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like something was there and unspoken, waiting. She studied him from the corner of her eye. His profile was sharp under the passing streetlights, his jaw set, but not tense. He looked calm, but there was a focus in his eyes, like he was thinking about something important. Erin found herself wondering why he had stopped for her. It wasn't like they were close. Maybe it was just kindness. Or maybe her thoughts were interrupted when Daniel slowed at a red light. He glanced at her again, his gaze lingering a little longer this time. "You always stay late at the office." She gave a small shrug. "Work piles up." He smiled, but there was something in it that didn't feel like small talk. "Or maybe you stay late because you don't want to go home." The words surprised her. They weren't said in a teasing way, but gently, like he was stating something he somehow knew to be true. She turned her head to look at him, but he kept his eyes forward, watching the light. She didn't answer right away. "What makes you say that?" she asked softly. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel just enough for her to notice. "Because I know what it feels like," he said. Erin's chest tightened a little. There was something in his tone and an echo of his own loneliness that made her curious, almost protective. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the light turned green and he pressed the gas. They turned off the main road and into a quieter part of the city. The rain had eased slightly, though the streets still glistened under the lamps. The ride should have been short, but Erin had the strange feeling that something was shifting between them, something she didn't fully understand yet. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her mind full of questions she wasn't sure she should ask. What was Daniel hinting at? And why did it matter to him whether she went home late or not? Outside, the rain whispered against the windows. Inside, the air felt charged as if the next word spoken might change the rest of the night. Erin had no way of knowing then that in less than half an hour, she would hear something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The car moved smoothly along the wet streets, the tires making a soft hiss against the pavement. Inside it was warm, but the air between them felt different, thicker somehow. Like the silence wasn't just quiet, but holding something neither of them wanted to name yet. Erin sat with her hands resting on her lap, her gaze shifting between the road ahead and the rain streaking across the side window. She could see her own reflection in the glass, faint and blurred by the water. She wondered if she looked as tired as she felt. Daniel drove with an ease that made her think he had done this route many times. Though she knew this wasn't the most direct way to her place. It was as if he wasn't in a hurry to get her home. Maybe he just wanted to avoid the traffic on the main road. Or maybe he was buying himself time. They had passed 2 sets of traffic lights before he spoke again. "You work too much," he said, his voice calm but certain. Erin gave a small smile, not looking at him. That's what people do when they have bills to pay. "Oh, that's what people say when they don't want to talk about why they stay late at an empty office," he replied, glancing at her briefly. The comment made her pause. There was no teasing in his tone. It wasn't an accusation either. It was quiet, almost concerned. "You've been watching me?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. "Not like that," he said quickly, his eyes still on the road. "I just noticed things." She raised an eyebrow but kept her gaze forward. "And what exactly have you noticed?" "That you don't rush home," he said simply. "Most people can't wait to leave work. You linger like there's nothing waiting for you outside those walls." His words landed with a weight she didn't expect. It was strange the way he could sum up something she had never admitted out loud, not even to herself. Her apartment was quiet. Her life neatly organized but empty. Sometimes she did stay late just so she didn't have to face that silence. But how could he know that? Erin turned slightly in her seat to study him. He looked calm, but she sensed something beneath the surface, an understanding that came from his own experience. "What makes you so sure?" she asked. Her voice softer now. He kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened just enough for her to notice. "Because I know what it feels like," he said finally. "I've gone home to places that didn't feel like home. The rain outside had softened. Now only a faint drumming on the roof." Erin felt the urge to ask him more to find out what he meant. But before she could, the road curved, and he took a turn down a smaller street lined with trees. For a moment, Erin thought maybe they had reached her block, but she quickly realized they hadn't. This wasn't the fastest way. He was taking her through quieter roads where the houses were spaced out, and the only light came from the occasional porch lamp. She could have asked him why, but she didn't. Something about the calm way he drove made her want to let him lead. The way as if the destination wasn't as important as this moment between them. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that made you aware of every small detail. The sound of the wipers, the warmth of the heater, the faint scent of cedar in the car. She was aware of how close he was, the way his arm moved when he shifted the gear, the quiet focus in his face. It felt strange, this awareness. Daniel was younger than her and the son of her boss. She had never allowed herself to think of him beyond polite interactions. But tonight the boundaries she had built around herself felt thinner. As they passed under another street lamp, he glanced at her again. "I mean, you don't ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" he asked. Erin blinked at the question. "What do you mean?" "I like you wake up, do your job, talk to people, but none of it really feels alive. Like you're somewhere else in your head, even when you're here." She let out a quiet laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Well, you talk like someone twice your age." Maybe I've seen enough to feel twice my age," he said, his tone serious. She didn't know how to respond to that. The car slowed as they approached a stop sign. Daniel looked both ways before continuing, his movements deliberate. He didn't seem to be in a rush, and neither was she. Erin turned her eyes back to the window, watching the way the rainwater made the streetlights blur into soft halos. Part of her wanted to ask him what had happened in his life to make him speak this way. Another part of her was afraid to find out because she sensed it might pull her closer to him than she was ready for. And yet, she couldn't ignore the pull that was already there. The road narrowed ahead, and the trees seemed to lean closer. their wet branches shining under the dim lights. Daniel's voice broke the quiet again. "I'm not trying to pry," he said, his tone softer now. "Yeah, I notice when someone is carrying the same kind of quiet I carry." Her heart beat a little faster at his words. She wasn't sure what he meant by the same kind of quiet, but deep down she thought she might understand. Outside, the rain kept falling in a gentle rhythm. Inside, Aaron realized something important. This wasn't just a ride home. This was the beginning of a conversation she didn't know she had been waiting for, and somewhere deep inside, she knew the next thing Daniel would say might change more than just the course of tonight. The rain had softened to a faint mist, almost as if the night itself was holding its breath. Daniel slowed the car as they entered a quieter neighborhood, the kind of place where the houses stood far apart, and the streets felt more like private lanes. The glow from the street lamps was gentle here, casting pools of warm light that broke up the darkness. Without a word, he pulled over beneath one of those lamps and put the car in park. Erin's heart gave a small, startled jump. Oh, this wasn't her street, and they hadn't even been close to her apartment yet. "Why are we stopping?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Daniel rested his hands on the steering wheel for a moment as if gathering the right words. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his breathing slow. Then he turned his head to look at her. "I shouldn't be telling you this," he began, his voice low and almost unsure. But I can't keep pretending I don't see you." The words sent a strange warmth through her chest. "See me? Yes," he said, his gaze locked on hers now. "Not just the way you look in the office. I see you. I see the way you hide. How tired you are. The way you put everyone else first. The way you smile when you're hurting. I notice all of it." Erin felt her throat tighten. Daniel began, but her voice was too soft, almost caught. He leaned back slightly, his hand still gripping the wheel. "I've liked you for a long time, Erin. Longer than you probably think. I didn't say anything before because..." He let out a short, frustrated breath. "Because you're my dad's employee. Because you're older than me. Because it would be complicated." Her heart thudded painfully. She wanted to stop him to tell him not to go down this road, but at the same time, she wanted to hear every word. "But tonight," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "I couldn't just watch you walk out into the rain again, going home like you always do alone, thinking no one cares, because I care, Erin, more than I should." She felt the weight of his words pressing against the quiet space between them. Outside, the rain whispered against the windshield, a soft, steady sound. Inside, the air felt heavy, like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. "You're my boss's son," she said finally, forcing the words out. They sounded thin, like paper compared to the way her heart was pounding. "I know," he replied quickly. "Believe me, I know. I've told myself 100 times to keep my distance. But it's not working anymore. Every time I see you, He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. "Can't stop thinking about you." Erin looked away out the side window, her chest aching. She had spent years building walls around herself, safe, steady walls that kept her life simple and controlled. She didn't let people in easily. And yet, here was Daniel sitting in the driver's seat, speaking words that made those walls feel like they might crumble. Daniel, you don't know me as well as you think," she said softly, though even as she said it, she wasn't sure if it was true. He shook his head. "I know enough to know I don't want to see you disappear into your own loneliness. I know enough to want to be the one you come to when the day's been too much." His voice softened now, almost a whisper. "I know enough to care a lot." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. She could feel him watching her, waiting. Her own thoughts were a jumble. Part of her wanted to run to shut this down before it went any further. Another part wanted to lean into the warmth in his voice, the truth in his eyes. Her hand rested on her lap, fingers curling slightly. Daniel's hand shifted on the console close to hers, but not touching. The space between their fingers felt charged, like one small movement could change everything. "Why now?" she asked, her voice breaking just a little. "Why tell me this tonight?" Because," he said, his eyes holding hers. "I'm tired of wishing I'd said something. I don't want to wonder anymore. I'd rather risk you telling me to forget it than keep pretending I don't feel this way." Erin's chest rose and fell with slow, careful breaths. The sincerity in his voice made her ache. He wasn't playing a game. She could tell this was real for him. I don't know if I can give you what you think I can, she said finally, her words barely above a whisper. You don't have to give me anything right now, Daniel replied, his tone gentle but firm. Just don't push me away yet. Outside, a single drop of rain slid slowly down the glass, catching the light from the street lamp. Inside, Erin's world felt different, tilted, fragile, full of possibilities she hadn't dared consider before. She didn't know what she was going to say next. She only knew that whatever happened from this moment on, nothing between them would ever be the same again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The car felt still, as if the world outside had gone quiet just for them. His eyes held hers steady and unafraid, as if he was trying to tell her without words that he wasn't going anywhere. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Erin finally let out a small, shaky laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because she didn't know what else to do with the way her heart was pounding. You're too young to be talking like this, she said, shaking her head lightly. Or maybe you've just met the wrong people, he countered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She didn't have an answer for that, and maybe she didn't need one. A few minutes later, he started the car again. The engine's hum broke the quiet, but it didn't break whatever had just passed between them. They drove the rest of the way to her place in near silence, the kind that felt full rather than empty. When they finally pulled up outside her building, she unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, not quite ready to open the door. Thanks for the ride, she said, her voice softer than she meant to be. Ooh, and a time, he replied, and she knew he meant it. She stepped out into the damp night air, the faint smell of rain still lingering. As she walked toward her door, she felt his eyes on her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. She didn't turn back, but she knew deep down that tonight had shifted something. She couldn't name it yet, but she could feel it. And whether she was ready or not, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something she had spent years convincing herself she didn't need. And that, more than anything, was what scared her.